Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. Yeah, there we go. Got the volume. It's 10:58 p.m. A little bit of a late start tonight. I got up late today. I got up a little after 10 a.m., which is pretty late for me. Um, so I'll be up till about 2 tonight. Um, Went to town today, and I don't know what's going on, but my grocery store, they found a new mozzarella vendor and a better price. You got to understand, like, everything imported here is super expensive. Like, if you buy local, you'll get great deals. Like, if you like, you get really good chocolate here. Like, and because cacao grows here, right? And you can get cacao too, and people make a beverage out of it, and it's really quite something. It's almost like an organic narcotic. Yeah, the people, I don't do it. I'll try and find it, but people who do it, um, they say it's like organic ecstasy, yeah, like MDMA. And I don't even know what that's like because I've never done MDMA. I must be the only guy on the planet who's never done MDMA. But I'm not a drug guy, right? I smoked a little bit of weed in my day, and that's about it. Drugs have never had a huge attraction for me. And remember, I started like a meditative life fairly young, right? So they don't can't really do intoxicants when you're on a serious unfoldment path. And as a general rule, I don't like any synthetics. Okay, so MDMA is it's a synthetic, right? It's a pharmaceutical. It's not a naturally occurring thing, so I don't want to do it. Oh, that's good coffee. Yeah, so I got 10 pounds of mozzarella, two 5 pound bags of mozzarella for about $32 US. Is that right? Yeah, it's about $32 US, maybe 36. I forget the exact price. It was about 8,000 colones. You basically double it and take away three zeros, right? That's how you do the currency exchange because it's 500 colones to a US dollar. So, and again, this, like I say, there's something like, I don't know, super weird going on in this country. I always manage to find like the weirdest places in the world to live. Taiwan was pretty weird in 92 to 94 as well because it was kind of a staging ground for the Chinese expansion. Maybe I'll go into that more in another podcast sometime. I don't feel like going down that rabbit hole tonight. And I'm not really prepared to. Tonight, I want to talk about money. Now, I mean, I've done, I guess you could say, money podcasts before, but I just want to take a slightly different angle on it. And I've made some relatively bold statements in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think it was in the womb inseminated by Solomon. I stated that money is probably the greatest weapon ever devised. And it is a weapon, don't kid yourself. Okay, it's many things. It's not just a weapon. It's not. It's how you use it. You know, a gun is a gun. It only has one purpose. You're not going to hammer nails in with a gun. You know, a gun is for shooting bullets, and it's a weapon. So I don't mean money's a weapon in the same way that a gun is a weapon. Money is a much more sophisticated weapon. Money is a multidimensional weapon. Money in its present form is an expression of the extraterrestrial colonization of this planet. I know, bold statement. If you go through my podcasts, you'll find one about a year ago. And I think just when you're like flipping through YouTube, you'll see a picture of an alien, and it's actually a folded US dollar bill. They don't go out of their way to hide it. Although you kind of have to be looking for it. Right? But once you find it, there's absolutely no mistaking what it is. Now, money, like so many of the things that have caused extreme damage to the human race, is the perfect weapon because it involves you, us. Money in and of itself cannot act. It has no agency. It's inert. It's powerless. It has no spirit. It's just a piece of paper correlated to a valuation in an international system. The center of all money has been and still is the US dollar. I don't think anything will dethrone the US dollar. I think that the crypto stories are nonsense. I differ with a lot of people on this. I differ with people I profoundly respect in the areas they expertly comment within. Cliff High is a proponent of cryptocurrency. He's a master communicator documenting our time, our zeitgeist, and an excellent predictive analyst. Absolutely phenomenal predictor of the future. Dr. Jack Cruz in El Salvador, one of the other great podcasters out there, or I should say, an interviewee. He's being interviewed more and more and more and more. And his expertise is the medical system. He's a neurosurgeon. Literally, he operates on human brains. Very smart guy. Also a big proponent of cryptocurrency. There are some things that cannot and will not be transferred to a non-physical form. And there's reasons that they cannot be transferred to a non-physical form. I will use the example of books. If you read a book on a tablet, if you read a Kindle book, you will get the essence of the book. You will get all of the images that the author put in the form of descriptive prose. You will get mental images and imaginative constructs of the characters. You will get a sense of dialogue. You will understand the story. But there is an aspect of the book that will be left unmanifest in you if you do not read the book in a physical, printed form. I wish I could tell you I had a rational way of explaining this to you. I wish I could say something inside the black box now that makes what I'm saying sound sane. But I can't think of anything. It's just something I know. Language is a very powerful weapon as well, and probably the greatest weapon ever created. Language. Again, like money, it's not just a weapon. But like money, it can be used as a weapon. There are reasons that expressions come into existence. The one I'm thinking of now is the pen is mightier than the sword. When you hear somebody speak, the potency of what they are saying is best received in person. It's best that you see the person with your eyes and that you feel the person. Because human beings have certain signatures associated with their presence. And that signature accentuates the language. So if you had been physically present when Martin Luther King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech, you would have been affected for the rest of your life, and you probably would have known that you were a part of a history-making event. I would say the same is true for John F. Kennedy's speech on secrecy and secret societies. Imagine, just imagine what it would have been like to be present for the Sermon on the Mount. Those words were so dangerous, the Sadducees and Pharisees had Christ arrested for blasphemy. Imagine how magnetic and affecting it would have been to hear a harangue from Julius Caesar. I know. Harangue, definition: a lengthy and aggressive speech. I kid you not, the language is just falling away. This is not the original. They are changing the language right under our feet, and nobody's catching on to this. A harangue in its original definition was a highly charged speech given by a military leader to his troops before a battle. Hand to God. I am becoming more and more convinced as I have taken up the habit of looking words up while podcasting that the Mandela effect and other magics applied to our reality are affecting the language. In fact, I would say that I'm almost certain of this now. It seems as though every time I look up a word, my understanding of it is a little bit askew. Not always. Sometimes it's just the perfect word and the definition reinforces that I have selected the perfect word. But more and more, that's not the case. Imagine what it must have been like to see Macbeth performed live on its opening night with Shakespeare in the audience. Imagine. When a book is taken out of its paper form, its physical manifestation, part of its reality and charge is dissipated. This is irrelevant if the book is flat and it's just information. This would be true for textbooks, biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics. It would make no difference whether you read them in Kindle or whether you read them in a printed form. The Devil in Us would be profoundly different digitally than it would be in its printed form. I know that. I am the author. I've already shared with you a lot of what goes on when I write these books. Almost everything that goes on when I write these books. They profoundly affect my sleep and my dream space. So something is using me for agency. Remember the concept of agency, the reality of agency. I have said on the Talamanca Review in the past, quite some time ago, maybe a year and a half ago, or thereabouts, a little bit less than a year and a half, when The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me, was uploaded to Kindle Direct Publishing in its paperback form and its digital form. I had 5 days of dreams every night with a group of rabbis in what I assumed was a synagogue. To me, it looked like an adjunct room to an old library. A library you might find at Harvard University or Yale or Princeton. It looked like a room that would have been perfectly in place at the private school in the film Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams and the first on-screen job for Ethan Hawke. Started his career. So to physically manifest something with human energy, and especially something which becomes the focus of significant human energy, like a book, like money. You're creating, in a sense, an energetic doorway into the world. Now, this is not to say that you cannot enjoy The Devil in Us as a digital book read on a tablet. You may very well enjoy it and get a lot out of it. But I am asserting tonight that there is something more in the physical manifestation of the book. Paper and words. the greatest weapon ever created. So great, in fact, that they realized that this is the way that they should do money as well. There's only so much you can do with coins. You cannot be specific with coins. If the coins are fiat, representative of wealth rather than the wealth itself, meaning not made of a valuable metal like nickel or silver or gold, then there's only so much you can do with the coin. And if the coin is fiat, you only need it for small denominations. Now, a printed note is a promissory note. The original promise was that you could return the note for its weight in gold. And they recanted that in 1972 or 71. And that meant that the note lost some of its potency, but none of its magic. Anything that can hold human attention is a weapon in the right hands. Money can hold and capture human attention. In fact, many people will spend their entire lives focused on money. When the conditions for survival and procreation become more dire, competitive, people might very well be more inclined to kill for money. In fact, I have already told you on the Talamanca Review that a significant portion of the population in a first world country now kills for money. We used to associate that with train robbers, stagecoach robbers, bank robbers, street muggers. Those were people who might kill for money. And nobody saw the way in which money had been weaponized. And weaponized to spiritually corrupt. Weaponized to separate us. weaponized to turn us against each other, weaponized to collapse us. One might say that it first came to the state of weaponization in the 1980s with a gentleman by the name of Michael Milken, who invented what came to be known as junk bonds. Let me give you a little bit of background on Michael Milken. Michael Milken, junk bonds. Born July 4, 1946, an American financier. He is known for his role in the development of the market for high-yield bonds, junk bonds, and his conviction and sentence following a guilty plea on felony charges for violating U.S. securities laws. Milken's compensation while head of the high-yield bond department at Drexel Burnham Lambert in the late 1980s exceeded $1 billion over a 4-year period, a record for U.S. income at that time. With a net worth of US $6 billion as of 2022, he is among the richest people in the world. Milken was indicted for racketeering and securities fraud in 1989 in an insider trading investigation. In a plea bargain, he pleaded guilty to securities and reporting violations, but not to racketeering or insider trading. Milken was sentenced to 10 years in prison, fined $600 million, although his personal website claims $200 million, and permanently barred from the securities industry by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, what we commonly call the SEC. His sentence was later reduced to 2 years for cooperating with testimony against his former colleagues and for good behavior. Milken was pardoned by President Donald Trump on February 18, 2020. What is a junk bond as defined by Michael Milken? Let's get into this a little bit because tonight's podcast is money and money as a weapon. A junk bond, in the context of Michael Milken, refers to a high-yield bond issued by a company with a lower credit rating, often considered speculative or non-investment grade by credit rating agencies. These bonds are issued by companies with less established financial histories or those facing financial difficulties. The Encyclopedia Britannica wrote a bit about him. Okay. One more thing, because what is a bond in the world of finance? Got to get all the basic definitions out of the way. I don't imagine a bunch of economists are listening to me. So in finance, a bond is a fixed income security that represents a loan made by an investor to a borrower, typically a government or corporation. Let's reread that. In finance, a bond is a fixed income security that represents a loan made by an investor to a borrower, typically a government or corporation. According to Investopedia, essentially, when you purchase a bond, you're lending money to the issuer, who promises to repay the principal amount face value plus interest over a specified period. So a lot of entities will issue bonds. Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve issues bonds. The Bank of Canada issues bonds. Every central bank in the world issues bonds. Bonds can be issued by companies or governments and generally pay a stated interest rate. So it's an instrument, or in the way Milken did it in the private sector, it's the issuance of a bond, which is a promissory note to pay back the value of the bond plus interest. So it's a way of circumventing the money system and creating your own money through a corporation. So I could technically and legally sell bonds on my next book. I could say to you guys, the listeners of the Talamanca Review, I want to spend 6 months writing a book. I don't want to work my trade while I'm working on the book. I want to concentrate on the book. To do this, I need money, and I don't have the money to do this, to go without work for 6 months. And I could issue a series of $1,000 bonds with a 5% yield annually and promise to have them paid back after 3 years based on the book sales. It's that simple. Anybody can issue a bond. Now, what they're saying is that Milken, in issuing what they called junk bonds, was selling bonds that were bereft of any security or true valuation. That would be the position of institutional finance, the Ivy League types. But he was just doing what they were doing, but without the moral authority. But nobody had ever thought to do what he did before. Okay? And he made his money as the broker, the person who would sell the bonds on Wall Street to the companies. Now, this became extremely dangerous because you could create complex financial structures for laundering money. And it also took away from the legitimacy of the first paper money. So you could say technically, in fact, literally and technically, you could say that if you pulled a $5 bill, a US $5 bill out of your pocket now, that is a bond. Okay? And so the US Federal Reserve and the US Treasury guarantee that bond. And because it is guaranteed by those two entities, you can go and you can trade that bond for goods or services. and people will sell you a pair of socks, a caramel latte at Starbucks. You could take that bond, put it in the bank, and reinvest it in the bond issuer through a third-party license to do so, which is a bank like Wells Fargo. And they might pay you 1.5% annually in a savings account, maybe 3%. I don't know what the interest rates are these days. But the whole thing is collapsing now. Largely because everybody's sort of figured out that there's really no valuation to any of this stuff. Now, money is the perfect weapon for taking down countries, because if the country doesn't have the moral rectitude to manage money properly, and you loan them more of it than they can pay back, and the loan agreement is well written under international law, the issuer of the loan, let's say the International Monetary Fund, which is just really another version of Michael Milken, they issue paper that everybody believes has wealth. It's like a collective delusion. The metaphor becomes the literal. It is one of the neatest tricks ever done. I will take a moment to plug my novel, God as an Economist. It explains money better than anything you're ever going to read. It explains it in every dimension, what money is. Getting back to my example, the IMF would write the loan in such a way that if the company or country, you could say that was a slip of the tongue, but they're actually synonyms now. There's no such thing as a country anymore. Money and the international structures that support it have corporatized all the countries. They're corporations now. The depopulations, those are layoffs. It's like IBM laying people off in the 70s. It's like Chrysler laying people off in the early 80s. It's like the factories in America laying people off when manufacturing went over to China in the early mid-90s. They're layoffs. This is the genius of money as a weapon. It steals the spirit of your enemy. It steals the confederacy of your enemy. It steals the unity of your enemy. If you ever have time, and I know people don't have a lot of time these days, people are trying to survive. I understand that. I am sensitive to that. But if you have the time, make a study of what Germany did to build themselves back into the economic powerhouse and the war entity that they became for World War II, almost winning the war, after the Versailles Treaty. The Versailles Treaty was a series of financial restrictions so severe upon Germany that there was no economy to speak of. Foreigners were buying up their homes. Sound familiar? Women were selling themselves on the streets in large numbers to eat, giving their bodies just to eat and survive. Germany was turned into a brothel, completely and utterly degraded. And Hitler came along, and he created an economic system called National Socialism that unified the people. Remember, what did I just say money does? As a weapon. He recognized that. So he circumvented it by creating National Socialism, which is fascism. Very similar principle to Karl Marx, but communism was created as a global system, not a national system. So when you do it nationally, it's considered evil. When you try to take over the world as a communist entity, it's considered benign by communists. Somebody make that make sense for me. So this is why fascism became a dirty word. This is why we can't talk about Germany anymore. They don't want us thinking about Germany. They don't want us looking at World War II. Do not confuse what I'm saying. I am not saying that the Nazis were good. They were pretty horrible. They ran concentration camps. They experimented on people. They degraded people. They got as steeped into the occult as any Masonic or Kabbalistic lineage. Very dark. They were racist, master race. Not good people. Not a good ideology, Nazism. You wouldn't want to be living in a country that was policed by the SS. But economically, it's worth taking a look at Germany. What he did. So Hitler did things that drove the bankers crazy. They had the best manufacturing and engineers in the world. It's just in their genes, the Germans. Very smart people. Very industrious, very unified, very hardworking. So they would go to countries in Central or South America or Africa who grew food. And because they didn't have any money because of the Treaty of Versailles and the war reparations, they would say to the country, well, you know what? We will build you 25 engine cars for trains. You give us X number of thousands of tons of wheat. And the Africans or the South Americans are going, are you crazy? Nobody's ever given us trains for food before. And Hitler said, well, that's what I'm offering. And he started to form trading relationships that circumvented money. It was like a direct barter. Can't have that. The 20th century told us everything we need to know about who our real enemy is. And the enemy is the people behind this money system, which is being deliberately collapsed now and deliberately timed in its collapse to coincide with an utter dependence upon it in the first world, because the desire is to depopulate the first world and repopulate it. Money. What are you going to do? I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.